I think I should tell you that I've given a lifetime to comedy, and the next 90 minutes is going to seem like a lifetime to you.
It started, oddly enough, with what was supposed to be a casual moment, an offhand conversation during a commercial break on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson sometime in the late 80s, when the king of late night was still reigning from his Burbank throne. The red off-air sign had barely flickered to life when Johnny Carson, known for his composed, eternally cool persona, turned to his guest and muttered something that left even the veteran crew wide-eyed. "You know who I can't stand?" he began, voice lower but no less cutting, like a man itching to finally unload. What followed would be one of the most startling behind-the-scenes revelations of his legendary career, a spontaneous naming of 7 actors he openly admitted to hating. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. To understand the weight of such a declaration, you have to remember who Johnny Carson was. Not just a talk show host, but the talk show host, a cultural touchstone. For 30 years, his stage was where careers were made, especially for actors, comedians, and musicians trying to break into the mainstream. Carson's couch was more powerful than any Hollywood casting office. So for him to name names of real people he couldn't stand, was seismic. Like hearing a head of state rattle off enemies not in policy but in personality. He wasn't a man prone to tabloid drama or personal vendettas played out in public. That wasn't his style. And that's exactly why this moment hit with the force of a thunderclap. The names came slowly at first, like each one was a shot of whiskey he had to pour for himself. Clint Eastwood was the first, which sent a shockwave through the room. Eastwood, the silent cowboy, the Dirty Harry icon, the brooding actor-director who rarely gave interviews and exuded masculine stoicism? Carson apparently found him cold, distant, and, according to one insider account, arrogant to the point of dismissal. They had crossed paths at various NBC events, and Carson felt Eastwood treated people like background noise. He resented what he saw as a cultivated tough guy persona that was, in his eyes, less authenticity and more egotism in a cowboy hat. Then came Chevy Chase. This one, in retrospect, might not be as surprising. Chase's reputation in the industry has always had a few sharp edges, known for being difficult, even abrasive, especially during his early years on Saturday Night Live. But what bothered Carson, reportedly, was Chase's attitude during his stint as a guest host when Johnny was on one of his rare vacations. Chase, at that time riding the wave of foul play and Caddyshack, was said to have treated the show like it was his, with little reverence for Carson's legacy. One crew member described the vibe as Chevy treating Carson's empire like a sketch rehearsal. That didn't sit well with Johnny, a man who valued protocol, timing, and above all, respect for the stage. The third name stopped the room cold: Sean Penn. At that time still emerging from the wreckage of his tabloid-drenched marriage to Madonna, Penn was known for his volatility, punching photographers, smoldering in interviews, and generally moving through Hollywood like a live wire. Carson had interviewed Penn once early in his career when Fast Times at Ridgemont High had just cracked open a new chapter of slacker youth on screen, but he never invited him back. Behind the scenes, Johnny reportedly found him moody and antagonistic, an actor who seemed almost insulted by the idea of being charming for a national audience. Carson's view? If you're going to sit on that couch, at least pretend you want to be there. Fourth was Shelley Winters. Yes, Winters, the 2-time Academy Award winner who'd made a name for herself playing complicated, often tragic women in films like A Place in the Sun and The Diary of Anne Frank. But Carson's dislike, according to those present, had little to do with her talent, and everything to do with what he considered unbearable diva behavior. One infamous backstage episode involved Winters yelling at a young assistant for bringing her the wrong brand of bottled water, a brand, it turned out, that hadn't even existed until months after the show was taped. Whether it was memory distortion or just another tall tale from a long Hollywood night, Carson apparently walked away from every interaction with Winters feeling like he'd survived a hurricane of ego. Then came the fifth, Tony Curtis, the Some Like It Hot star, once the very definition of mid-century movie star glam, was someone Carson had admired in his youth. But admiration didn't survive first-hand exposure. Johnny thought Curtis had become, in his later years, a parody of himself, vain, overly theatrical, and obsessed with reviving his golden days rather than aging with grace. Carson, for all his own vanity, was a stickler for humility. There was something about Curtis referring to himself in the third person, often off camera but within earshot of the crew, that made Johnny's skin crawl. Sixth was someone who had actually done several appearances on The Tonight Show, Burt Reynolds. This one was the biggest gut punch for some. Reynolds and Carson had a complicated on-air chemistry, often ribbing each other with borderline insulting jokes that audiences ate up. But according to Carson, it was just that, an act. Offstage, their personalities clashed like titans. Johnny found Burt to be insufferably smug, a man who always needed to win the room, even when the cameras weren't rolling. The straw that broke it for Johnny was an episode where Reynolds brought on an impromptu pie fight segment. Spontaneous TV gold, most agreed. But Carson hated that it derailed the show's flow. He saw it not as playful chaos, but as a hijacking. And then finally, there was Robert Blake. Known for his intense performances in Beretta and later for his tragic infamy, Blake had only appeared once on The Tonight Show. According to insiders, that was by Carson's explicit request. The encounter backstage was allegedly so uncomfortable, Blake was described as curt, irritable, and condescending, that Johnny had him quietly blacklisted. It wasn't just personal chemistry. Carson believed Blake lacked the kind of charisma and humility that late night required. He said it plainly, "I don't want that guy in my house again." What made this list so potent wasn't just the names. It was the fact that Johnny Carson had never been known for this kind of candor. His career had been built on finesse, deflection, and charm. He was the man who let others stumble while he delivered a side glance and a perfectly timed punchline. For him to break that facade, even behind the scenes, felt like peeling back the wallpaper of a pristine room and finding scorched walls beneath. These weren't just people he didn't get along with. They were actors he hated. That's a heavy word in any context, but in Carson's world, where silence, subtle shade, or a missed invitation could speak volumes, saying it aloud was like detonating a landmine of truth. It disrupted the myth of Johnny as the neutral host, the benevolent gatekeeper. It reminded everyone that even the most skilled ringmasters harbor private grudges. What's more intriguing is how these names, once spoken, seemed to ripple through the entertainment industry. Whispers started. People who had worked with Carson began re-evaluating old stories. Hadn't there been an awkward vibe during that Chevy Chase interview? Didn't it seem strange that Sean Penn never returned, even when he won his first Oscar nomination for Dead Man Walking? Wasn't it odd that Eastwood never co-hosted despite their overlapping star power? Carson's list became a kind of secret Hollywood scripture. Not official, not printed, but passed along in bars, dressing rooms, and backstage lounges. No one ever confirmed the list publicly. Johnny never mentioned it on air, and those who heard it directly were smart enough to treat it like nuclear material. But it stuck. The names never changed, and the legend grew. More than anything, the episode underscored the tension between performance and persona in Hollywood. These were all people who, in their own ways, shaped the culture of their time. Yet even they weren't immune to the judgment of someone like Carson, whose influence extended far beyond a monologue or a nightly guest list. He wasn't just critiquing performances. He was evaluating character, presence, authenticity. And maybe that's the most fascinating part. For all the glitz and PR and carefully crafted images that define stardom, none of that mattered once you stepped into Johnny's orbit. The stage was his, the camera lens an extension of his mood. You could be a box office draw, an Oscar winner, or a tabloid favorite. It didn't matter. If you didn't measure up in his eyes, you were out. It wasn't about morality or personal ethics. Carson himself had demons, from his stormy marriages to his issues with drinking. It was more elemental than that. He hated arrogance without charm, fame without humility, star power without grace. For a man who made his living making other people look good, that hypocrisy stung. The moment passed. The lights came back on. The guests on stage returned to their polished banter, the audience none the wiser. But in that strange charged interval, just a few minutes off camera, a seismic truth had been spoken aloud. Carson had peeled back the mask of Hollywood just a little, enough to let us see that even its most beloved icon had lines he wouldn't let anyone cross. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Johnny Carson naming 7 actors he hates now? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.